The cold didn't feel like winter at first. It felt like being wrapped in wet paper thin, clinging, impossible to shake off. The shelter was a converted community center on the edge of the city. It's a kind of building that used to host children's chess tournaments and weekend folk dance classes. Now, the windows were taped with crisscrossed strips of packing tape, not for decoration, but to keep the glass from shattering if something far away exploded again. Not that anyone said the word exploded out loud. People said incident, or situation, or just sighed and looked at their shoes. He sat near the back corner of the main room, on a folding chair that wobbled slightly when he shifted his weight. He was small for 10, almost 11, though no one had remembered to mark his birthday this year. His coat was too big, borrowed from a donation bin, the sleeves hanging past his knuckles. He kept his hands tucked deep in the pockets, fingers curled tight, not clenched, just still. Like if he moved too suddenly, something inside might crack. He didn't speak. Not because he couldn't, he could. He'd once recited the names of all the planets in order, backward and forward, for his science teacher. He'd argued with his older cousin about whether potatoes counted as vegetables or carbs. He'd whispered bedtime stories to his little sister, making up voices for the fox and the moon. But that was before now. Words felt heavy, like stones in his throat. If he tried to say something, even just yes or no, his chest would tighten, his breath would shorten, and the world would tilt just slightly, like a record skipping on an old player. So he stayed quiet, nodded, shook his head, pointed. People got used to it. The volunteers learned to read his eyes, the flick toward the bathroom door, the slight lean when he was tired, the way he'd stare at the floor when the noise got too loud. The shelter hummed with life. Kids playing card games on the linoleum floor, adults lining up for hot tea and thick slices of rye bread, someone softly strumming a guitar in the corner, singing a song he didn't know. It should have felt warm. But to him, it felt like standing just outside a window, watching a family eat dinner inside. Close, but not part of it. His only real possession was a small, cracked tablet. Screen spiderwebbed from a fall, maybe during the train ride, maybe when the bag was dropped at the border checkpoint. He didn't remember. The battery icon blinked red most days, and he rationed its use like water in a drought. He'd charge it slowly, overnight, plugged into a power strip someone had run along the baseboard near his cot. He only used it for one thing: music. A kind woman with silver-streaked braids and a soft voice had given it to him at a transit station weeks ago. She'd seen him sitting alone on a bench, knees drawn up, staring at the cracked tile floor. She didn't ask questions. Just sat beside him, handed him a paper cup of warm milk with honey, and after a while, the tablet. It's got some quiet things on it, she'd said. Not songs with words. Just sound, like rain on a roof, or wind in trees. He hadn't thanked her, couldn't, but he'd nodded once. Quickly Anne held the tablet like it was something sacred. That night, in the dim glow of the shelter's nightlight, he'd explored it. No games, no videos. Just folders. One was labeled classical for calm. He didn't know what classical meant, not really. He'd heard it once in a cartoon where a cat wore a tiny tuxedo and conducted an orchestra of mice, but he tapped it anyway. The first file was named Beethoven Moonlight Sonata, first MVT. He put in the earbuds thin, foam-padded ones, slightly stiff from a jammed pressed play. What came out wasn't loud. Wasn't fast. Wasn't happy, exactly, but not sad in the way that made his stomach drop. It was slow, deliberate, like someone walking carefully across a frozen pond, testing each step. A single note held, then another, then a ripple soft, like water, disturbed by a falling leaf. He closed his eyes. The left hand played a pattern low, steady, repeating like a heartbeat. Not racing, not stopping, just there, present, and over it, the right hand sang. A simple melody, a question, maybe, or a memory. It rose, hesitated, fell again, like someone trying to remember how to breathe after holding it too long. He didn't move, didn't blink, just listened. The world outside, the coughing in the next cot, the murmur of adults whispering by the heater, The occasional truck rumbling past on the road faded. Not gone. Just quieter. Like turning down the volume on a radio, no one was tuning. He played it again and again. Each time, something shifted. Not in the music in him. His shoulders, which had been hunched near his ears for weeks, lowered just a fraction. His fingers, still in his pockets, uncurled. His breathing, shallow and quick before, deepened, in and out, matching the rhythm of the left hand. Steady, safe. He didn't know who Beethoven was. Didn't know he was deaf when he wrote this. Didn't know it was composed over 200 years ago for a woman he loved but could never be with. He didn't need to. The music didn't explain itself. It just was. And in that he found something he hadn't felt in a long time. Stillness. Not emptiness. Not numbness. But stillness, like a pond after the wind stops. Clear, reflective, capable of holding light. Later, much later, when the shelter lights were off and most people were asleep, he lay on his thin mattress, earbuds still in, the tablet resting on his chest. The battery icon now glowed a faint amber 12%. He knew he should stop, save it. But he pressed play one more time. This time, near the end, something unexpected happened. His lips moved, not to speak, not even to whisper. He hummed. Just the first few notes, the opening phrase. Quiet. Barely there. A thread of sound, fragile as a spider web in morning light. But it was his. It came from inside. Not forced. Not faked. Just released. Like a sigh he'd been holding for months, he stopped instantly, eyes wide open in the dark. He touched his mouth with his fingertips, as if to check had that really happened. He waited, listened to his own breath, to the silence of the room, to the faint, fading echo of the melody in his head. Then, slowly, he hummed it again. Louder this time. Still soft, still shaky. But real. He wasn't thinking about the past. Wasn't dreading tomorrow. Wasn't counting how many days it had been. He was just here, in this moment. With this sound, when the piece ended, the tablet screen went black. Battery dead. He pulled out the earbuds. Sat up. Looked around. The shelter was quiet now. A few snores, a rustle of blankets. Shrill moonlight spilled through the high-taped window. Painting a silver rectangle on the floor, he swung his legs over the edge of the cot, walked barefoot across the cool linoleum, past sleeping forms, to the far corner of the room. There, against the wall, stood an old upright piano. It wasn't beautiful. The wood was scuffed. One of the pedals didn't work. A few keys stuck if you pressed them too hard. Someone had placed a potted plastic fern on top, and a chipped mug that said Worlds, K.'s teacher. But it was a piano. He'd seen kids play on it during music hour, simple songs. Twinkle, twinkle, ode to joy with one finger. He'd never gone near it. Too exposed. Too loud. Too much attention. But tonight was different. He stopped in front of it. Looked at his hands. Turned them over, palms up like he was seeing them for the first time. Then, very slowly, he lifted his right hand. He didn't sit. Didn't open the bench. Just stood and pressed one key. Middle C, a soft, warm thump, not sharp, not bright. Just present. He waited. No one stirred. He pressed it again, then hesitantly. He reached for the next note up D, then E, then D again. See, he was playing it. The first 5 notes of the moonlight melody. Awkwardly, out of rhythm. His fingers clumsy, untrained. The piano sounded different than the recording duller. Slower, but it was there. In the air, in the room, he played it once. Stopped, listened, played it again. This time he let the last note ring. Held it. Felt the vibration travel up his finger, into his wrist, up his arm. He didn't smile. Not yet. But his eyes, those eyes that had been shuttered, distant. Like windows with the blinds pulled tight. softened just a little. He played the 5 notes a third time, and this time, as the final note faded into the quiet, he whispered so softly no one could have heard. Not even himself to words, not a name. Not a plea, just, it's okay. He didn't know if he meant it for the music, for the piano, for the girl in the next cot who sometimes cried in her sleep, or for himself, maybe all of them. He stepped back, looked at the piano like it was alive, then he turned and walked back to his cot. He didn't plug in the tablet to charge, not yet. Instead, he lay down, pulled the thin blanket to his chin, and closed his eyes. The silence now wasn't heavy. It was peaceful and in the quiet. The melody played on, not from a speaker, not from a screen, from inside. He slept that night without dreaming, and when he awoke the next morning, the first thing he did before sitting up, before drinking the weak tea they served at breakfast, was press his thumb and forefinger together, gently, like holding something precious. Then, under his breath, he hummed the 5 notes. C, D, E, D. C dot, slow dot, tender like a promise, like a beginning. The shelter buzzed to life around him, beds being folded, shoes being tied, voices rising in Polish, Ukrainian, a little Russian. Volunteers handed out sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. A woman handed him 1 ham and mustard on dark bread and smiled. He took it, nodded, and for the first time in a long time, he met her eyes just for a second, but it was enough. Later that day, during free time, he didn't go to the games corner or the drawing table. He walked straight to the piano. This time he pulled out the bench, sat, placed his hands palms down, fingers slightly curved above the keys. He didn't play right away. He just sat, breathing, listening to the hum of the heater, to the laughter of 2 boys wrestling over a deck of cards, to the distant sound of a bus pulling up. Outside, and beneath it all, the faint, a steady echo of a melody that had found him in the dark. He pressed the first note, then the next, and the next. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't loud, but it was his. And in that small, scuffed room, filled with people who had lost so much, a quiet miracle unfolded, not with fanfare, not with speeches, but with 5 simple notes, played by a boy who had forgotten his own voice, and was just beginning to remember it. No one applauded. No one even looked over. But the woman with the silver-streaked braids, the one who'd given him. The tablet stood in the doorway, holding a stack of sheet music. She watched him for a full minute, didn't interrupt, didn't smile broadly, just nodded once to herself. Then she turned and walked away. But later, when the boy went to the bathroom, she slipped something onto the piano bench, a small notebook on the first page in neat looping handwriting. She'd written, "For the days when words are too heavy. Keep going." He found it that evening, didn't write anything in it, not yet, but he ran his fingers over the page, and that night, before bed, he played the 5 notes again, then added 2 more, then 3. The melody grew, slowly, patiently, like a seed pushing through frozen ground. Spring wasn't here yet, but something inside him had begun to thaw, and it all started with a piece of music, old, gentle, a little sad, deeply kind, that found him when he was lost, and whispered, without words, "You're still here? I'm still here. Let's listen together." Spring came slowly that year, not with a burst of color, but with a softening. The sharp bite of the wind lessened. Puddles formed in the cracked pavement outside the shelter and stayed for hours instead of freezing overnight. Inside, the radiator hissed less angrily. People began opening windows just a crack, letting in air that smelled faintly of wet earth and distant blossoms. He still didn't talk much. Words came out in fragments, mostly yes, no, thank you, more but only when absolutely needed. Yet something had shifted. He moved differently, less like he was bracing for impact, more like he was listening to the space around him, to the rhythm of his own steps. to the quiet hum inside his chest that used to race and now, more often than not, settled into a steady pace, and every afternoon, without fail, he went to the piano. Not to perform, not to impress, just to sit, to press keys, to try again and again. Make his fingers do what his ears remembered. He'd learned the first page of the Moonlight Melody by heart now, though he didn't call it that. He just thought of it as the quiet one, the one that didn't rush, the one that let you breathe in the spaces between notes. He'd made mistakes so many. Wrong notes, stuck keys. Times when his fingers froze mid-phrase, and he'd have to stand up, walk away, stare out the window for 5 minutes, then try again. Once, frustrated, he'd slammed the fall board shut not hard, but with enough force that the plastic fern on top wobbled. He'd immediately flinched, expecting someone to scold him. But no one did. A boy nearby glanced over, shrugged, and went back to his puzzle. That small act of being allowed to be angry without punishment, without drama, surprised him more than the silence ever had. Then one rainy Thursday she appeared, not with fanfare, not in a uniform or with a clipboard, just there, an older woman, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled into a loose knot and glasses that slid down her nose when she leaned forward. She wore a faded floral dress under a thick cardigan and canvas shoes that looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. She carried a tote bag stuffed with sheet music, a thermos, and a small velvet pouch that clinked softly when she moved. She didn't go to the tea table, didn't join the knitting circle. Instead, she walked straight to the piano and sat down on the bench beside him. He stiffened, didn't move his hands, but his shoulders crept up. She didn't say anything, didn't smile in that too bright way some adults did, like they were trying to fix him with cheerfulness. She just watched his hands for a moment, the way his index finger hovered over a flat, trembling slightly, then reached out, not to touch him, but to gently lift the fallboard all the way open. Then she placed her own hands on the keys, not over his, not taking over, just beside, and she played the left-hand part of the Moonlight, those rolling, gentle arpeggios, like waves lapping at a shore. Dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Slow, even, unhurried. He didn't move. She played it once. Then again, on the third time, still without looking at him. She nodded, just a small tilt of her chin toward the right side of the keyboard, a silent invitation. His breath caught. He lifted his right hand, hesitated, then placed his fingers where they B-E-L-O-N-G-E-D-C-D, E flat, D-C-S-H-E. Kept playing the left hand steady, grounding. He played the melody shaky at first, then smoother as she matched his pace, never rushing him, never correcting. They played the first 12 bars together. When they finished, the room was quiet, not because everyone was listening, but because the music itself had created a pocket of calm. The card players had paused mid-hand. A toddler stopped banging her spoon. Even the radiators seemed to sigh and fall silent. She finally turned to him, not with praise, not with good job, or you're so talented. Just a quiet look, warm, knowing you hear it, she said simply. Her voice was low, a little rough, like someone who'd spent years speaking softly in practice rooms and libraries. Not just the notes, the space between them. He blinked, didn't answer, but he nodded once. She smiled then. Not big, just enough to crinkle the corners of her eyes. My name's Elgbieta, she said. I used to teach piano. Now I just help where I can. He didn't offer his name. She didn't ask. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out a thin book, Mozart, Easy Pieces for Young Players. The cover was worn, corners bent, pages yellowed at the edges. She opened it to the first page. This one, she said, tapping the music, is like sunlight on a clean window, simple, bright, no hiding. It was Mozart's Sonata in C major, the very first movement. 4 lines of music, mostly quarter notes. A tune so familiar it felt like something you'd hum without knowing you knew it. This, she said, is where we start building." He frowned slightly. "Why not? More moonlight?" She considered that. "Because sorrow is important. It teaches us depth, but joy teaches us how to stand up again." She didn't say it like a lesson, just like something true. He looked at the music. At her hands, knuckles slightly swollen, veins raised but fingers still graceful, still sure. "Okay," he whispered. It was the first full word he'd spoken in front of someone other than Shelter's staff since arriving. She didn't make a big deal of it, just nodded again. "Okay," she echoed. And so it began. Not with schedules or tests. Not with scales or finger drills at first, anyway. They met every Tuesday and Thursday after lunch for 30 minutes, sometimes 40 if no one needed the piano. She never rushed. If he stumbled over a measure 3 times, she'd say, "Let's walk it." They'd stand up, step side to side, clapping the rhythm TA-TA-TA-TA-TA-TA-TA-TA like children playing a game. She'd make up silly words to go with the notes. Squirrels run fast, catch the nut, hop back home. He never laughed out loud, but sometimes, just sometimes, a tiny puff of air would escape his nose. Almost a laugh, she taught him how to listen to his own playing, not to judge, but to notice. Is that note sharp? Or is it just impatient? She'd ask. Does this phrase sound like someone running, or someone finally sitting down to rest? He started to hear things he never had before, the way a G natural and an E together made a sound that felt like green grass after rain. How a sudden shift from C major to G7 pulled your heart a little sideways, like leaning into a turn on a bike. One day she brought a small, slightly dented metronome. Not the digital kind, old school, with a little metal arm that swung back and forth, tick, tick, tick. "Your friend," she said, placing it on the piano. "Not your boss." He wound it up. Listened. At first, playing with it felt impossible. His fingers fought it too fast, then too slow, then freezing altogether. He got frustrated. His jaw tightened. He was about to push it away when she placed her hand lightly over the swinging arm. "Stopping it. Watch," she said. She played the first line of the Mozart slowly, perfectly in time without the metronome. Then she started it again with the tick. "Your job isn't to chase it," she said, her fingers moving lightly over the keys. "It's to walk beside it, like a friend holding your elbow on an icy path." She played the phrase again. And this time, he heard it not as a command, but as company. He tried again. This time, he didn't look at the metronome. He listened. Let the tick be part of the music, not against it. And something clicked, not loudly. Not with a flash of genius, just a quiet alignment. His fingers, the notes, the steady pulse all moving together. He finished the phrase. She didn't clap. Didn't say yes, or perfect. She just looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition, not of talent, of presence. Like she was seeing him, not the quiet boy, not the refugee, not the case file, but the person who'd just, for a few seconds, been fully here, in this room, in this moment. Making something beautiful out of simple things. After that, progress wasn't straight. Some days his fingers felt stiff, his mind foggy. Some days, a sudden loud noise, a dropped tray in the kitchen. A door slamming would send him back into himself, shoulders hunched, hands in pockets. But she never pushed. Never said, "Come on, you were doing so well." Instead, she'd close the Mozart book. "Let's just listen today," she'd say. And she'd play something, sometimes a Chopin waltz, light and spinning. Sometimes a Bach prelude, like water flowing over smooth stones. She never explained the composers. Didn't say this man was a genius or this piece changed music forever. She said things like, "This one feels like walking through a forest after rain, everything glistening, but the path is still firm." Or this phrase, "It's like saying I'm still here without using words." Once he asked quietly, while she tuned a slightly flat A, "Why do you do this?" She didn't look up. Kept turning the peg, ear close to the string, Because music doesn't care where you came from, she said. It doesn't ask for papers. It doesn't judge your past. It just says, do you want to try? And if you say yes even once, it meets you halfway. He thought about that for a long time. A few days later, during their session, he made it through the entire first movement of the Mozart start to finish. No stops, no wrong notes he couldn't recover from. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't concerto, but it was complete. When the final chord faded, she didn't speak. She just reached into her tote and pulled out a small square of dark chocolate, not the chalky kind from donations. She broke it in half and handed him a piece. They ate it in silence. The chocolate was rich, slightly bitter, sweet underneath. He looked at the keys, at his hands no longer trembling. Then very softly he said, "It feels like putting on dry socks after walking in wet shoes all day." She turned to him. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with light. "Yes," she said, "exactly like that." Something changed after that, not overnight, but gradually. He began speaking, not just in music sessions, but elsewhere. To the woman who handed out bread at breakfast, "Rye, please." "Thank you." To the boy who dropped his pencil during math here. He picked it up and handed it back. To the volunteer organizing the bookshelf. "Where do these go?" He held up 3 picture books. Each word was small. Each effort visible. He'd pause, take a breath, then let it out with the sentence. But he was trying, and people noticed. Not with pity, but with quiet respect. One afternoon, as he walked back from the piano to his cot, a little girl, maybe 5, with tangled braids and mismatched socks, stugged his sleeve. "Can you play the Sunshine One?" she asked, pointing toward the piano. He looked at Elgbieta, who was packing up her things. She just raised her eyebrows. "Your call." He walked back, sat, played the first line of the Mozart. The girl sat, cross-legged on the floor in front of the piano, chin in hands, grinning. When he finished, she clapped once loudly and said, "Again." He played it again, and this time he smiled. Not a big smile. Just the corners of his mouth lifting, like the sun peeking out from behind a cloud. Elgbieta watched from the doorway, sipping from her thermos. Later, as she packed her bag, she slipped a new sheet of paper into his notebook, the one she'd left weeks ago. On it, she'd written, in her looping hand, "Music isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up hands, heart and all. You're doing that, keep going." He read it that night, under the blanket with his flashlight. Then he opened the notebook to a fresh page, and for the first time wrote something back. Just 2 words, and careful. Slightly uneven letters, "Thank you." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. The next day, when he arrived at the piano, the note was gone. In its place, a single sheet of music, not Mozart, not Beethoven. This one had a Polish name at the top, Friedrich Chopin, and beneath it, a title, Nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9 No. 2. Elgbieta stood beside the bench. "Hands folded, this one," she said softly, "is for when you're ready to hold more than one feeling at once." He looked at the swirling notes on the page, more complex, more lyrical, more alive. He didn't say he was ready, but he didn't say no. He just turned the page and placed his hands on the keys, ready not because he wasn't afraid, but because, for the first time in a long time, he trusted the next note would come, even if it took a few tries, even if he had to breathe first, even if someone was beside him. Playing the part he couldn't yet manage, steady, patient, believing it till he found his way back to the melody, and in that trust, something deeper than skill began to grow, something like hope, not loud, not certain, but real, like a single green shoot pushing up through cracked concrete, quiet, persistent, alive. Time doesn't heal all wounds. People do that, slowly, unevenly, with patience and missteps and days when it feels like You're sliding backward faster than you ever moved forward. He was 13 now, taller, shoulders filling out, voice catching sometimes between low and high, when he spoke, which he did more of now, not in speeches, not in stories about the past, but in questions. Why does this chord sound like waiting? Or can we try that section slower? Or, once after a long silence during a difficult passage, what do you do when your hands remember something your mind wants to forget? Elgabita didn't answer right away. She just closed the music book, set her teacup down, and looked at him, not with pity, not with the careful lightness adults sometimes used, but with the steady gaze of someone who'd carried her own quiet storms. I play through it, she said finally. Not fast. Not pretending it isn't there. I play with it. Let it be part of the phrase. Like a scar in wood, it's still part of the grain. I thought about that for a long time. He'd been accepted into the city's youth music group, a small ensemble that met twice a week in a church basement turned rehearsal space. Not an orchestra, not yet. Just 8 kids, some with years of lessons, some like him learning as they went. They played simple arrangements, folk songs, movie themes, a simplified version of Ein Klein, Nachmus. He played second piano, mostly chords, harmonies, supporting the melody carried by the violin and flute. He liked it. Liked the shared focus. Liked how, when everyone listened, the music became something bigger than any one person. Liked the way the conductor, a retired music teacher with a voice like warm gravel, would say, "Again, but this time listen to the cello. Let her lead you in." But adolescence arrived like a sudden storm, no warning. Just wind and rain. Moods shifted without reason. Small frustrations flared into hot silence. He'd snap at a teammate over a missed cue, then feel ashamed for hours. He started skipping lunch to practice alone, pushing his fingers harder, faster, as if sheer effort could outpace the restlessness inside. Then came the day of the Chopin. They were preparing for a small public performance, just families and volunteers, in the community center's main hall. Nothing big, nothing formal, but it was the first time he'd play for people who weren't shelter staff or fellow students. People who might notice. Elgibieta had suggested the nocturne in E-flat major. "It's lyrical," she'd said. "It breathes. It doesn't demand perfection, just honesty." He'd practiced it for weeks. Learned the shape of it, the long, singing melody that floated over rolling left-hand figures, like a voice rising above quiet water. He knew where the turns were, where the dynamics swelled and softened. He, even after many tries, managed the rubato, that gentle bending of time Chopin loved, where the melody floats just ahead or behind the beat, like a sigh. Rehearsal day. The hall smelled of floor polish and old paper. Folding chairs were set in neat rows. A few parents sat near the back, chatting softly. He sat at the piano, hands resting on his knees, breathing the way Elgbieta had taught him. In 4/4, hold for 2. Out for 6. He started well. The opening was tender, unhurried. He let the first phrase unfold like a letter being opened slowly, carefully. Then came the third line, the part where the melody rises, becomes more urgent, more searching. His fingers moved, but something shifted inside. A sound not in the room, but in his head. A sharp, distant crack, like ice breaking or something else. He didn't flinch, didn't stop playing, but his breath hitched. His left hand faltered, missed a note, then another. The rhythm tightened. The rubato vanished. The music became stiff, mechanical, like a clock winding down. He tried to recover, pressed on, but the melody, once flowing, now jagged, felt like it was slipping through his fingers. Then, in the middle of a rising phrase, he stopped. Just stopped. Hands lifted from the keys. Silence. Not the good kind, the kind that holds music. This was the other silence. The heavy one. The one that says, "I can't." He stood up. Didn't look at anyone. Walked straight out of the hall. Past the open door. Down the corridor. Out into the courtyard. It was cold again. Not winter cold, but the sharp, damp chill of early autumn. He sat on a stone bench under a bare-limbed maple tree, elbows on knees, face in hands. He didn't cry. He just sat, angry, not at the music, not at the piece, not even at himself exactly. At the unfairness of it, all the way something beautiful could suddenly feel like a mirror. Reflecting back everything you were trying not to see, he heard the door open behind him, didn't turn, footsteps slow. Deliberate crossed the courtyard, stopped beside the bench. Elgabiata didn't sit. Didn't say it's okay. Didn't say you'll get it next time. She just stood there for a moment, looking up at the tree. Chopin wrote this in Paris, she said, her voice quiet but steady. He was 20. Maybe 21. Far from home, Warsaw was. Tense, uncertain, he knew he might never go back. She paused. He missed the smell of chestnut trees in spring, the sound of church bells from the old square. His mother's voice, he carried all of that with him, always. And when he sat at the piano, he didn't push it away. He let it in. She finally sat beside him, leaving space between them, not crowding. This piece, she said, Poles have a word for the feeling in it. Well, it's not just sadness. It's deeper. It's sorrow with love still inside it. Like holding something broken but precious. He kept his face down. People think music is about making pain disappear, she went on. But real music? It's about giving pain a place to live without taking over the whole house. It's a long silence. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it. He knew he'd never go back. She nodded. For a long time, yes, though he kept hoping. He sent his heart home in notes instead of letters. Finally looked at her. His eyes were dry but tired. What if? What if the music brings it back? The thing you're trying to forget? She didn't flinch. Then, you let it come, she said. You don't fight it at the door. You let it sit at the table. You say, I see you. I know you're here. And then you keep playing. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small, worn pencil. Chopin didn't write this perfectly the first time, she said, handing it to him. He scratched things out, wrote in the margins, changed his mind. The beauty isn't in it being flawless. It's in it being true. He turned the pencil over in his hands. The eraser was nearly gone. After a long while, he stood up, didn't say anything, just walked back inside. The rehearsal had continued without him. The violinist was playing a folk tune, light and cheerful. No one looked up when he entered. He walked to the piano, sat, opened the Chopin again, placed his hands, and began not where he'd left off. But from the very beginning, this time, when he reached the rising phrase, the one that had tripped him, he didn't rush, didn't force. He let his left hand stay steady, like an anchor. And when the melody climbed, he let it tremble just a little. Let the note waver, like a voice on the edge of tears. It wasn't polished. It wasn't correct. But it was honest. When he finished, the room was quiet, not awkward, but full. The conductor lowered his baton. The violinist looked at him, then gave a small, slow nod. No applause, just presence. Later, as they packed up, the conductor walked over. You know, he said, adjusting his glasses, the nocturne isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be felt. And today, it was. No praise. Just truth. That night, back at the shelter. He didn't practice. Instead, he opened his notebook, the one Elgabieta had given him. Man turned to a blank page. He wrote, Today. I stopped. Then I started. Again, the music didn't leave. It waited. He didn't write more. He didn't need to. The next day, he asked Elgabieta something he'd never asked before. Can you tell me about when you got stuck? She looked surprised, then thoughtful. Ah, she said, stirring her tea. You mean the time I couldn't play for 6 months? He nodded. She smiled, not sadly, but with the kind of warmth that comes after a long winter. It was after my husband passed. Heart, sudden. One day he was making pancakes, humming off key. The next, gone. She paused, looked out the window. I sat at the piano, put my hands on the keys, and nothing came. Not anger, not tears, just silence. Like the music had packed its bags and left. What did you do? I didn't play, she said. For weeks I just... Sometimes I'd press one key, just to hear it, C, or G, let it ring, then press it again. Same note, same sound. It was all I could manage. How'd you start again? She looked at him. Someone brought me a cup of tea. Sat beside me. Didn't say you should play. Didn't say he'd want you to. She just said, play one note. Just one. For me, and you did. I did. See? Then she said, now play the note you wish she could hear right now. He waited. I played E flat. She said softly, because it's the key of this nocturne, the key of gentle sorrow. Of love that doesn't end when someone leaves. She sipped her tea. That's when I knew the music hadn't left. It was just waiting for me to be ready to meet it again. He thought about that. Then quietly, what if you're never ready? She reached over and tapped the notebook where he'd written the music didn't leave. It waited. You already know the answer, she said. He did. A few days later, he asked to try something new, not easier. Not harder, just different. Can we try the revolutionary etude? He asked. Elgibeta raised her eyebrows. That's intense. I know. It's fast, angry, full of fire. I know. She studied him. Why that one? He looked at his hands because sometimes the storm isn't outside, he said. Sometimes it's in here. What? He touched his chest. And I want to learn how to play through it instead of running. She didn't say yes right away. She went to her tote, pulled out a different book holder, bound in faded blue cloth. Opened it to a page dense with black notes, like rain falling sideways, this piece. She said, was written after Warsaw Roseanne fell. Chopin was in Stuttgart when he heard the news. He poured everything into this. Grief, rage, hope, defiance. It's not pretty. It's not calm. She played the opening bars, just the left hand. A torrent of notes, thunderous, relentless. But listen, she said, playing it again slower. Under all that motion, the right hand still sings. A melody, faint, sometimes buried, but there, like a light in a storm. He listened, and for the first time, didn't hear chaos. He heard resistance. He heard someone refusing to be silenced. He heard himself. Okay, he said. Let's start with the first line. He didn't play it fast. Didn't try to master it. They broke it down, beat by beat, hand by hand. He learned the left hand runs in tiny chunks, for notes. Then 8. Then a full measure, painfully slow, like climbing a steep hill one step at a time. His fingers ached. His shoulders tightened. Some days, frustration made him want to slam the keys, but now he didn't walk away. He'd stop, breathe, shout loud, I'm stuck. Elgibeta would nod. Good, now we know where to dig. She taught him to practice in the difficulty, not around it. If your hand cramps, she said, don't stop. Slow down, keep the shape. Let the tension rise. Then release it into the next note. She showed him how to use his whole arm, not just fingers, to create power, so his hands wouldn't tire. How to let the wrist lead, like a bird dipping in flight, and slowly so. Slowly, he barely noticed it at first. Something shifted. The storm didn't leave, but he learned to stand in it. Not unafraid, but no longer swept away. One afternoon, after a particularly tough session, he played the first 16 bars all the way through, at half speed. Not perfectly. Not elegantly, but connected. Each note leading to the next, like stepping stones across a fast-moving stream. When he finished, sweat on his forehead, breath uneven. Elgibeta didn't say a word. She just reached into her bag and pulled out 2 small oranges, real ones. With the green stem still attached, she handed him one. They peeled them in silence. The sharp citrus scent filling the space between them. He ate a segment. Tart. Sweet. Alive. Then he said, softly, it doesn't feel like running anymore. She looked at him. No, she agreed. It feels like standing your ground. He nodded, and in that moment, knew the music wasn't fixing him. It was finding him again and again, even when he got lost, even when he stopped, even when the world felt like it was breaking apart. The notes were still there, waiting, ready not to erase the past, but to help him carry it lighter, with dignity, with grace, with the quiet, unshakable strength of a single melody rising clear, true, and unbroken through the storm. And that was enough for now. For today, for the next note, and the one after that,